privilege this morning. Susan is going to share with us her Christian history series. And I believe the Lord wants us to know some of these great saints of old that set the stage before us. So she's going to come and share this morning about St. Patrick.
I love to learn about Christian history, and this is going to be a fantastic teaching today because most of you think St. Patrick's Day is about what?
Four-leaf clovers.
Four-leaf clover, and what else?
Can I share?
Yes.
Green beer.
It's not about green beer.
That's what they say.
Those practices were adopted in
Wearing green clothes.
late Middle Ages, actually. So we're going to get right into this, and I hope to do even some biographies. And if you've never really studied Christian history, you need to. It's great to read like one Christian biography of a great person every year. It will really help you. And so we're going to get right into my Christian history series. This right here is a tile mosaic that was from, they believe, the first church. It might have been James's church. And it's the people that did this. Imagine this. They were eyewitnesses to Jesus feeding the 5,000, the loaves and the fishes. Eyewitnesses right there. I love this picture. Amazing. Eyewitnesses. Well, let's move on. St. Patrick's Day is coming up in a couple of days, and we're going to learn the real, true history of St. Patrick. He found Ireland all heathen and left it all Christian. This was a brave, courageous, strong believer. The historical records begins with the Han Dynasty. They extended sections of the Great Wall of China along the Mongolian border around 220 AD. The Han period was considered the golden age for the Chinese history, spanning over 4 centuries. The barbaric Huns terrorized Central Asia, and this made it more difficult for the barbaric Huns to attack China because they put the wall up. And so the Huns moved westward, and they literally terrorized and displaced tribes throughout Central Asia. They displaced many tribes such as the Goths, Franks, Anglos, Saxons, Alemanni, Brugians, Lombards, Alans, Jutes, etc. They went through villages, they burned them, they killed, they were brutal, very brutal. And Rome had to withdraw from other regions to protect their own border. Britain had been under Roman control since the time of Julius Caesar, 100 BC to 44 BC. So Rome had to pull back their protection, and they left Britain unprotected. This left Britain so unprotected that mobs raided the settlements, and they carried people off to sell as slaves in Ireland. I know there would be politically correct people who are actually incorrect that talk about slavery in our country back 200 years ago, is that it was the only instance, but slavery has existed since the dawn of creation. And probably some of my ancestors in Ireland were carried off as slaves. They were brought as slaves to America to work on the railroad back in the 1800s, I believe. And so it's good to know real history. And so these mobs came and just terrorized. And they would, probably kill the older people, and they would take the children as slaves. And they were cruel. Ireland was ruled by the bloodthirsty, superstitious, pagan Druids. If you go on Google today, I did this, and they said the Druids were the intellectual community.
Okay.
So much for Google. You can't trust everything on it. The Druids, you see there's a man there naked. They were like the demoniacs that Jesus drove the legion of demons out of. And they were, naked, crazy, and just demon-possessed. And so Ireland was ruled by these people. They were not wise leaders. And the Romans, in their first encounters with these exposed, naked, insane warriors, were shocked and frightened. They were howling, and it seemed so possessed by demons, so outrageous was their strength, featuring all the terrors of hell itself. Now this is out of a quotation, it's from Thomas Cahill's book, How the Irish Saved Civilization. These are actual accounts that were written from this time period. That's how we know about these things. The Druids were also responsible for Halloween. And there's an event called the Burning Man, where they have this little man that they burn. Is that in California? Has anyone heard about that? Oh, it's called the Burning Man. It comes from the Druids' practice of building a wicker structure very big, and they put their prisoners in it, and maybe babies, to sacrifice, and they burned it. And they would do human sacrifices in this burning wicker man. So there is an event called the Burning Man, and it gets its roots from that Druid human sacrifice event. The Druids, from whom Halloween originated, sacrificed prisoners of war to the gods and newborns to the harvest gods. They proudly displayed the heads of their enemies in their temples and on their palisades. They even hung them from their belts as ornaments, and they used them as footballs in victory celebrations. They were fond of using skull tops as ceremonial drinking bowls. And I would say they were very demon-possessed. And they worshipped Satan himself. So those are the Druids. They also sculpted heads, both shrunken and decapitated. They used them as ornaments. So these people were demon-possessed and wicked, and they ruled Ireland at that time. We're going to back up just a little bit. Around 405 AD, at the age of 16 years old, while working in his father's farm near the sea, 50 curraghs, or longboats, filled with raiders, weaved their way to the shore. This is the deeper detail of his captivity. And so there was no Roman army to protect. The city was vulnerable. The warriors quickly demolished the village, and St. Patrick darted among the burning houses at 16 years old, burning houses and screaming women and children. And he was caught. He was dragged by the barbarians aboard one of these boats and taken to the east coast of Ireland. For 6 years, Patrick herded animals for a Druid chieftain. He later wrote in his life story called The Confessions of St. Patrick, "But after I came to Ireland, every day I had to tend sheep, and many times a day I prayed. The love of God and his fear came to me more and more, and my faith was strengthened. And my spirit was moved so that in a single day I would say as many as 100 prayers, and almost as many at night. And this even when I was staying in the woods and on the mountains. I used to get up for the prayer before daylight, through snow, through frost, and through rain. There the Lord opened the sense of my unbelief, that I might at last remember my sins and be converted with all my heart to the Lord my God, who comforted me as a father would his son." And I want to pause here and ask you, have you come to the Lord in this manner, where you sensed his holiness and cried out to him with a need and were confronted with your sinfulness, that you truly surrendered everything to him? This is a picture of true conversion. Then Patrick had a dream. He had a lot of dreams. He was very close to the Lord. One night I heard in my sleep a voice saying to me, "It is well that you fast. Soon you will go to your own country." And again a voice saying to me, "See, your ship is ready." And it was not near, but at a distance of perhaps 200 miles. Then I took to flight. I went in the strength of God, who directed my way until I came to that ship. And apparently he swam out to it. The Lord told him supernaturally. Divine direction. And in his confession, Patrick wrote, "In the depth of night, I saw a man, Victoricus, coming as if from Ireland with innumerable letters, and he gave me one." And so he had this vision. So Patrick eventually went back to Britain and was reunited with what was left of his family. Then when he was about 40 years old, he had another dream calling him back to Ireland as a missionary. got to have some courage to do this. And while I was reading, I thought I heard the voice of those near the western wall call out, "Please, holy boy, come and walk among us again."
Wow.
So Patrick returned to Ireland. He confronted the Druids, he converted the chieftain, and used the three-leaf clover to teach the Trinity. The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The four-leaf clover was a symbol of good luck to the Druids. So we won't use a four-leaf clover. The Druids tried to ambush and kill Patrick nearly a dozen times. Daily, I expected murder, fraud, or captivity, but I feared none of these things because of the promise of heaven. When the Irish converted to Christianity, they abandoned their pagan Druid laws, which Patrick replaced with Bible-based Latin Irish laws. He converted the whole Ireland. St. Patrick also had a showdown. I didn't go into the details of this. It was a showdown like Mount Carmel with a Druid king. They were forbidden to light a fire before Easter to kind of celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It was forbidden in Ireland. But what did St. Patrick do? He lit the fire. And this caused, eventually, the army was in fear of the power that was on St. Patrick. The army turned against the king, and the king literally came and bowed at St. Patrick's feet and was converted. This Druid chieftain, this is mighty, this is miracles. I wish they'd make a movie of this. But he came to Christ on his knees. And now this is, you'll see images like this. This is kind of in the Catholic image with the hat and everything. That's because in the first century, the 3rd century church, the Catholics kind of took over the church, and until the Reformation. Yes, thank you. Until the Reformation. And so that's why the images look like this. But we can learn a lot from the Catholic history. It's very purposeful. And St. Patrick had a breastplate, and we know of this. And then he wrote his own autobiography, and other people wrote about him. So we have a wealth of material about St. Patrick to know this is true. He was a mighty man of faith. And on his breastplate was this, plus there's a whole long poem. But we're going to read this together and the next line. He was such a man of God, and I think we can look at these heroes of our faith, look at their faith and what they accomplished. Think about the courage it took, St. Patrick, to stand up against the evil. And we can apply that to our life. We are strengthened and encouraged by others. Iron sharpens iron. That's why it's important to look at this and think about it. Think about it on St. Patrick's Day when other people are celebrating in a strange way, which, by the way, those other practices were adopted 1,000 years later for various reasons, the wearing of the green and different things. But this is the true history of St. Patrick. So let's read this together. Christ ever with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ within me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ at my right side, Christ to my left side, Christ in his breadth, Christ in his length, Christ in depth, Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of every man who speaks to me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. And this is more that was on his breastplate. Let's read together. I bind unto myself the name, the strong name of the Trinity, by invocation of the same, through 3 in 1 and 1 in 3, of whom all nature hath creation, eternal Father, Spirit, Word, praise to the God of my salvation. Salvation is of Christ the Lord. Amen. Amen. So he found Ireland all heathen and left it all Christian. Praise the Lord. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus.
Wow.